Welcome to Leapcast. I'm your host, Dr. George James. Leap stands for leaders, entertainers, athletes, and performers. And I'm on a journey to connect with high achievers and highlight their unexamined human moments.
When I went to prison, I was wrapped in this cloud of just bitterness and anger, and I was accusatory, like if this thing didn't happen, then that wouldn't happen. And there was a series of events that played out that led up to David's shooting that night. And I remember just kind of processing the things about that night that made me the victim in a way, like if they would only did this, then I wouldn't have did this, But earlier that night, I was DJing a party. They got into a shootout and guy gets shot in front of the party. Now, at the time I'm DJing, I don't know who the person is. All I know is everybody's running, they jumping fences, they getting up out of there, right? It's the hood, it's what goes down, right? So packing everything up, our crew that's there, we like, okay, we got to go back to the house. And so we're walking back after DJing the party, but everybody's on edge at this point because we don't know who got shot, who was the shooter. We don't know none of this yet. And when we was leaving, truck pulls up and, I got a pistol on me at the time. We all on edge like, yo, who is this? What's up? We don't know if it's our crew or whatever. We didn't have cell phones. You can just call and you got to page people back then and wait for people to call back. The guys in the truck turned out to not be any threat, and so now we're back at the house, but everybody's still wired up, still fired up. When David arrives at my place with another guy who I knew, like I didn't know David that night. I didn't know the other person who was in the car with him. I knew one guy who had brought them there, and they wanted to make a drug transaction. And it was for an amount that this guy never had made a transaction for, and then he's bringing two new guys. And so that escalated into an argument about whether they the police or not. And then that conversation escalated, and then I ended up shooting, tragically causing David's death. And immediately I was like, man, like you shouldn't have brought him here. Why are you trying to force me to make a deal? If this thing wouldn't have happened at the party, I wouldn't even been here. So it was like this list of excuses that was kind of built in. And when I went to the joint, even though they were built in excuses, I knew in the core of my being that there was a moment when I could have kept walking away, and I didn't choose that moment. And why I didn't choose it, I had all these other things that I couldn't identify back then. What I didn't understand was being triggered by having been shot 16 months prior in a similar situation and really being scared and having anxiety and all these things. So because I didn't have a language, I began to utilize all these other things as my reason why this happened that way. And it wasn't until I began journaling and really writing down the events of my life. And through that process, I began to be able to identify things in my household that I wasn't responsible for, but that I felt guilty about. You know what I'm saying? I was able to label things correctly, like this wasn't discipline, this was actually abuse. Through that process, I was able to take ownership and responsibility. It didn't matter why he was brought there, it didn't matter the circumstances. Ultimately, I'm the one who pulled the trigger, and I have to be responsible for that. And I have to acknowledge that and think about the harms that I caused his family, how I caused him harm, also how I caused myself harm, because me going to prison was harmful. But it was a process. That journaling, man, was a game changer.
This is Dr. George James, and I'll see you next time.